Chapter 15. I think I'll just have coffee this morning, Mrs. Potter. I'm not very hungry. Bella had already been awake for hours, tossing and turning most of the night. As she watched Mrs. Potter make a fresh pot of coffee and mix a batter for muffins, her brows puckered in worry over Jack. Knots formed in her stomach that had kept her awake most of the night. Bella rehearsed her conversation with Jack over and over. What had gone wrong? The evening that had started so well ended so poorly. Jack had shared his deepest heartache and pain with her. She'd never seen him so vulnerable. His shame, regret, and failures clung to him like a second skin. After all these years, he still carried misplaced responsibility for his father's death and for the loss of his wife and unborn son. Jack's words from last night made her tremble. I didn't love Alan like I should have. Don't you see, Bella? I didn't love and take care of my family as I should have. That's why I deserved Alan's hatred. I deserved the scar. I deserved to have my son die. Bella couldn't shake the sense that Jack had been pushing her away, that he'd been trying to tell her goodbye. But Bella was just as determined not to let her husband go without a fight. She swallowed the rest of her coffee and stood quickly to her feet. Thanks for the coffee, Mrs. Potter. Bella hurriedly washed her cup, setting it to dry in the dish rack. You're welcome, my dear. Come back later for muffins. Mrs. Potter waved her off, and Bella hurried out the kitchen and down the hallway to the west wing of the house. Today she decided she was going to uncover her husband's secrets. If it meant she had to go against her husband's express wishes, she would. His actions last night had shown her that she needed to take desperate measures to try and understand Jack. When she reached the last door on the left, she looked behind her. Seeing no one, she walked inside. This was her husband's bedroom. The large room looked masculine with its blue and gray colors on the walls and furniture. Her hands shook as she opened the top drawer of his dresser. It's not too late, Bella. You can stop this madness now. You don't need to find the key to go into that secret room. The voice in her head tried to stop her, but this was the only way she could learn the real truth before it was too late. Last night it sounded like her husband was withdrawing. There was no way she could just sit back and let him leave. Their relationship was too important to leave to chance. Bella searched through his dresser drawers, but found nothing. Looking around the room, she spotted 2 nightstands, one on either side of the large king-size bed. Mesmerized, she stood motionless, staring at the bed. Heat rose from her neck to her cheeks as she imagined what it would be like to be a real wife to Jack. She could picture being held in his arms every night and them loving each other. Bella, stop thinking about that. Making this a real marriage wasn't part of your agreement with Jack. Bella shook her head to chase away the images popping up in her imagination. As she walked toward the nightstand, she saw a phone, a lamp, and a photo. As she bent over to see the photo more clearly, she realized it was a picture of her and Jack at the theme park in Paris. It was a picture of the two of them smiling at each other. Jack's arm was around her waist, and she had sparkles in her eyes. Memories of that day brought a warm glow of happiness to Bella. Why would Jack keep this picture of the two of them near his bedside? A tiny spark of hope ignited in Bella. Maybe Jack cared for her more than she realized. Opening the drawer to the nightstand, she saw a couple of pens, a notebook, and a TV remote. Looking farther back, she spotted a ring of 3 keys. Her hand shook a little as she grabbed the keys. Closing the drawer quickly, she hurried out of Jack's bedroom and out into the hallway. All was quiet, with no one in sight. She walked toward the door to the secret room. Slipping the key in the doorknob, she opened the door. Hurrying inside, she pushed the door closed and switched on the light. Bella held her breath and looked around. Being in this room was like standing inside a sacred chamber for the dead. On one wall were large photos of Jack with his father. They were fishing together, playing baseball together, And there was another picture of his father's arms around Jack when he was around 13 years old. The next wall held large black and white images of a tiny baby in the womb. Bella realized that these photos must have been from the sonogram that was taken when Jack's wife was pregnant with their son. Next to those images was one small picture of his first wife in the late stages of pregnancy. As she looked down at the set of shelves below the pictures, she saw the handwritten note that Jack's pregnant wife wrote before she left. It had been torn up and haphazardly pieced together. Bella read the terrible words written there. "I can't look at you, Jack, and see your face day after day. I mean, before you looked sort of like a rugged modern-day Tarzan, which I liked. But now you look awful. You look horrible. You look beastly. I just can't stay with you. Not now." Bella's hands shook, and she dropped the note. Why would Jack hold on to these stinging words of rejection? With a heavy heart, she continued to look around the room. On the opposite wall were photos of Jack standing with his mom and 4 brothers. His arms were around their shoulders. From Jack's lopsided smile and bloodshot eyes, he looked like he might have had a little too much to drink before this photo was taken. It was almost as if this room was Jack's burial chamber of all that he'd lost. To Bella, it seemed like her husband kept all the things in this room as a reminder of all his failures and regrets. Jack believed he didn't deserve love because of all he'd done wrong. He didn't feel worthy enough to be forgiven. He didn't feel worthy enough to hope for a new beginning. He didn't feel worthy enough to be loved again. A tear slipped down Bella's cheek for all the ways Jack had punished himself over the years. Spying the baby crib and rocking chair over in the corner, she walked over and sat down. Her hands twisted together and white-hot pain coursed through her veins. She felt Jack's pain as if it were her own. The photos that hung on the wall and the empty crib beside her were proof of that. As her gaze switched to the small table beside her, she noticed a small audio player. Curious, she pressed the play button. When the popular children's song Lullaby by Johannes Brahms began to play, she smiled softly at Jack's choice in music. Memories surfaced of her father playing the song and singing the words softly to her every night as a small child. Tears trickled down her cheeks as the words to the first verse flitted through her mind. Lullaby and good night, with roses bedight, with lilies overspread, is my baby's wee bed. Lay thee down now and rest, may thy slumber be blessed. Lay thee down now and rest, may thy slumber be blessed. The gentle lulling of this song made her feel safe and loved. The words always reminded Bella of her dad's love, but she wondered what thoughts went through Jack's head when he heard this song. Did he remember the son he lost? She stopped rocking as a new revelation hit her. Jack had named his dog Brahms. He had told her Brahms was now 4 years old. Did Jack name his dog after the composer of the children's lullaby? And did Jack get the dog for his soon-to-be born son? Bella was pondering all these things when suddenly the door burst open and Jack hurried inside. Her husband stood before her, his eyes wide with accusation. "Bella, what are you doing here?" Brahms was by his side and lay down at the low growl he heard from his master's voice. Bella stared at Jack, stunned that he was home and standing right in front of her. Quickly, she clicked the audio player off and stood to her feet. Bella's hands trembled, and she wiped them on her jeans. Hi, Jack. Jack stopped her mid-sentence. "Didn't I make it clear to you that this was the one room in the house I was asking you not to enter?" Anger flashed in his unflinching gaze. It seemed Bella had miscalculated how upset Jack would be at her for invading his private space. "Yes, you did make it clear, Jack. I'm sorry for not respecting your wishes." Bella wiped the tears quickly away from her cheeks. Jack watched her, his eyes stormy and his shoulders stiff and resolute. A tic along the rigid set of his jawline revealed his anger. Bella shifted and bravely stepped closer to Jack, placing her hand on his arm. "Can you forgive me, Jack?" Her husband's gaze was cold and steady, but his eyes flickered at her apology. "Let's get out of here." With hurried steps, Bella walked ahead of her husband and into the hallway and waited. Jack walked out. The furrow between his brows revealed his simmering anger. Bella shifted nervously, not knowing what else to say to Jack. She'd never seen him this angry. He stared at her without saying a word. Swallowing nervously, she remembered the key. She pulled it out of her pocket and handed it to him. Jack took the key ring and slipped it into his pocket. "I've got to get back now." "But you just got home, Jack." "I came home to let you know that there was an explosion at the mine." Bella's eyes flew open wide. Jack ran a hand through his hair. "No one was killed, thank God, but a couple of my men were hurt. I've called the ambulance, and they should be there soon." Bella expelled the breath she'd been holding. "I just wanted to let you know so you wouldn't worry, Bella. Now I need to hurry and get back. You'll be safe here with Ben and Mrs. Potter. We'll talk when I get back home." Her husband nodded at her and hurried away. Bella stood there in the empty hallway for a moment longer before she turned and walked into the conservatory. So many mixed emotions warred inside of her. Bella paced through the greenery in the conservatory. Her thoughts flitted back and forth between what she'd learned about her husband in that secret room to the displeasure he'd shown at finding her there. Waves of guilt rolled over her. She'd let her impulsive nature guide her decisions, and it had landed her in hot water with her husband. Even though she'd apologized, Jack had been too upset with her to forgive her. The reason he'd come back to the house was to tell her about the explosion in the mine. Jack wanted to let her know so she wouldn't hear about it from someone else and worry. She was grateful that he wanted to protect her. Since meeting with Mason, she realized just how important that was. Bella realized she still hadn't told Jack about the documents she'd found in Mason's office. More than likely, what she discovered was related to the explosion at the mine. Bella hurried out of the conservatory to the entryway of the house. Slipping on a light jacket and comfortable walking shoes, soon she was ready to go. Ben passed her in his hurry to the kitchen. "Ben, can I ask you a favor?" "Of course, Mrs. Stevenson." "Did Jack tell you there was an explosion at the mine?" "Yes, he did. I've been organizing the ambulance and sending extra help." Bella nodded. "Good. I just wanted to ask if you could let Mrs. Potter know that I'm going to see Jack at the mine. I think I have an idea who might be responsible for the blast, and I need to let Jack know. I'll be back in a little while." Bella pulled the sleeves down on her jacket. "I don't think you should be going there, Mrs. Stevenson. Jack won't like it. It's not safe, especially not today." Ben's brows puckered in worry. "I appreciate your concern, Ben, but it's critical that I tell Jack. He will understand after I explain." "I don't like you being out there where it's not safe, Mrs. Stevenson." Ben's mouth formed a grimace, his brows puckered in worry. Bella lightly touched his arm. "I really appreciate your concern, Ben, but I'll be fine. I can take care of myself." She smiled at Jack's assistant and quickly walked out the door. A cool, brisk wind blew into her face and tugged at her coat as she stepped outside. She zipped her jacket up to her neck. Hurrying towards the shed, she found the four-wheeler her and Jack used the last time they'd gone to the mine. Turning it on, she drove the ATV out of the shed and along the trail that led to the mine. Reaching the silver mine, she parked the ATV and hurried toward the entrance. Many miners stood outside along with the ambulance and EMTs. Seeing Jack's mining supervisor, she walked towards him. "Mike, do you know where I can find Jack?" "I do, but it's really not safe for you here, Mrs. Stevenson. You should go back home. You can talk to your husband when he gets back." Mike's large body stood like a fortress, guarding the mine's entrance. "I appreciate that you're trying to protect me, Mike, but it's critical that I talk to Jack." "Mrs. Stevenson, that's really not a good idea." "Would it help if I told you I need to talk to Jack because I think I have an idea who is responsible for the explosion in the mine?" Bella smiled and watched Mike's eyes grow wide in understanding. Jack's foreman nodded. "Follow me. He's over this way." Bella had to step around chunks of heavy rocks and debris as they made their way to the back of the mine. They followed the path that Jack had taken her last time she'd been here. The loud, jarring sounds of steel against rock only got louder as they rounded the corner. She looked up to see Jack swinging the pickaxe over his shoulder, hitting the solid rock with pieces flying through the air in every direction. Mike motioned for her to stay back. Bella waited as Mike approached Jack. Her husband stopped swinging, and as his foreman pointed in her direction, Jack stared at her, his eyes cold and hard. The foreman walked away in a hurry. As Bella took in Jack's livid expression, she wanted to turn back and run the other way. She stood frozen as her husband walked slowly towards her. His low growl could have curdled milk. "What are you doing here, Bella? I thought I told you to stay at home where it was safe." Bella felt the blood drain from her face at his harsh words. Despite his gruffness, Bella stood still and faced him. "But I have something important to tell you, Jack." He just crossed his arms and stared at her. Bella rubbed her arms in an effort to warm herself from the abrupt chill from his frostiness. She needed to apologize again. "I'm sorry I went into your secret room, Jack. It was an impulsive idea that I shouldn't have acted on. I hope you will forgive me." Still, Jack did not move. "I know you're sorry, Bella, but I need more time. I'm not ready to talk about it yet." Jack expelled a frustrated sigh. Bella thought she'd try again. "But it's important that I tell you." "Not now, Bella. Can't you see I'm not ready to talk about this yet? Go back home. We'll talk later." Bella stiffened her back as her husband spun on his heel and just as quickly went back to work. Frustrated by her stubborn husband, Bella watched him for a few moments longer before turning to leave. Her mind was preoccupied with Jack's coldness towards her. "He didn't even listen to me. He just pushed me away like a child needing to go home." Bella sighed, irritated with her husband. He never did say he forgave her. "Stop complaining, Bella. It's partly your fault Jack is in such a foul mood. You shouldn't have gone behind his back." Expelling a long breath, she hardly noticed where she was going. The mine was dark as she walked. Her thoughts were a muddle, and she was unsure which tunnel would take her back to the mine's entrance. Bella thought she could hear voices down one of the tunnels, so she turned in that direction. She'd only taken a few steps when suddenly strong arms grabbed her from behind, holding her captive. As she began to scream, a hand covered her mouth, muffling her cries for help. Panic, cold and heavy, landed in the bottom of Bella's stomach. A crack, cold and tiny, suddenly got bigger in the pit of her belly and coiled its way up, leaving a trail of ice. It was like a plumber's snake slithered through her insides, sucking up all the blood. Memories assaulted her. She'd faced this terror years ago with the kidnappers. Determined not to let this happen to her a second time, she kicked at her attacker's legs in a desperate attempt to get away from the man. It was no use. His hold on her was like an iron grip. Bella didn't know how far he dragged her against her will. After a very long time, they reached a place in the mine where it was completely dark with no light. She could hardly breathe. Her captor forced her to sit down. She was seated on the edge of a big rock, but scrambled to get away. He caught her and held her tight while he tied ropes around her wrists and placed a gag over her mouth. She managed to kick him, but he soon tied her feet too. It was only when she was all tied up that her captor began to speak. It was completely dark, so Bella couldn't see his face. "Bella, how good of you to join me here." To her horror, Mason's grating voice broke through the silence. "I know you must be surprised to hear my voice. As much as I'd dearly love to see your face right now, I won't turn on a flashlight. Don't want anyone to find you. I'm sure you understand." Anger sizzled in Bella, and her nostrils flared as she tried to yell at him. "Sorry, with that gag on, I can't understand a word you're saying, Bella." Mason laughed in his usual overbearing way. Fear was causing her breaths to become more rapid and shallow. She forced herself to slow down her breathing so she wouldn't pass out. Bella was convinced Mason was completely mad. What did he hope to gain by holding her hostage? Mason stopped his pacing and stood beside her once again. "You might be wondering why I would drag you deep into the silver mine where no one can find you. Well, I'll tell you." Mason paused and continued. "I'm tired of Jack taking everything that should be mine. He has enough money to do whatever he likes. He's won over the good opinion of many of the town council members, and most of all, he married you, the girl I planned to marry." Bella whispered that she wouldn't have him as her husband even if he begged, but she knew Mason couldn't understand her muffled words. "You are the girl I planned to marry, Bella, but Jack ruined all of that, so I had to take matters into my own hands." Mason struck a rock with his boot, the chipping sound grating on her nerves. "So what I've decided to do is take his wife. I will finally have my revenge on Jack. This time, in order to get you back, your dear husband will have to pay me a very generous amount. So get comfortable, Bella. This will likely be a very long night for you." Mason started to walk away before he turned. "You won't be rescued by Jack until he gives me the money I deserve. Sweet dreams, Bella." As the echo of Mason's boots disappeared in the distance, a chilling, tingly, sweaty kind of fear took hold of Bella. She tried to take a deep breath, but the gag tied to her mouth only let in about half of the air she needed. A metallic taste filled her mouth as terror rushed through her pores in a sweat that reeked of fear. Memories of the kidnapping years ago started a fear of enclosed spaces inside her mind. Right now, that fear was growing and threatened to overpower all rational thought. Mentally, Bella pushed away the terror that filled every cell of her being. A sharp pain gnawed between Bella's eyes at her predicament. Her hands and feet grew cold and stiff, and she moved them as much as she could. She had no idea where she was. Only a tiny light peeked through what must have been a gap in the cave's wall near the ceiling. She watched it for a long while, the darkness hovering, watching. A different kind of fear than Bella had ever known grabbed hold. A chilling, tingly, clammy kind of fear. Its cold tendrils wrapped around her ankles and crept up her spine to the back of her neck. Bella wanted to run, but the ropes were knotted tight around her ankles. She screamed, but to her own ears the sound didn't reach much farther than the gag around her mouth. How long before someone realized she was missing? Would they be able to find her, hidden in the darkness? Bella remembered her husband's warm kisses. She realized that she loved him more than anything else in her life. Awareness grew inside of her at that moment. Her greatest desire, to be independent and in control, wasn't as important as what she really needed, which was to be loved by her husband. She needed to be loved by Jack, the one man she loved with all her heart. In this moment, she realized that she would willingly give up her independence to live every day with the man she loved. Right now, Jack was angry with her, but she had confidence Jack would do everything he could to rescue her once again. "Jack, please find me quickly. I need to see you again. I need to tell you I love you."